Hi everyone, I'm Miss Bailey and I'm with the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Los Angeles, and welcome to DIY STEM. In today's DIY STEM experiment, we will be dissecting an apple. Have you ever heard of that word before? Dissecting, or what a dissection is? Well, scientists perform dissections in order to learn more about whatever organism they're looking at, whether it be a plant, an animal, or something different. Today we'll be taking a closer look at the apple's anatomy. Now, anatomy is a fancy word for body parts. So if we take a closer look at the apple, we'll be able to learn a little bit more of why it is the way it is. So let's go ahead and look at what we need for today's experiment. For today's experiment, you'll need 2 apples, a butter knife, a marker, and not 1, but 2 paper plates. So for today's experiment, for our apple dissection, we will be looking at the external anatomy of our apple. External anatomy means the outside of the body. So let's go ahead and take a look at our apple and look at all the different sides to see what we can find on the outside. I've written these words on the paper plate for the external anatomy. So we have the skin, the calyx, and the stem. So first we're going to start off with the skin. And with our butter knife, we are very carefully going to take off a little bit of the skin. If you have a vegetable peeler, that will also work. But very carefully, we want to scrape off a little bit of skin, not too much flesh from the apple. Here we go. Let's take a closer look. What does it feel like? Does it feel smooth or waxy maybe? The skin helps retain moisture or keep moisture into the apple. It also helps protect it from any pests or bugs that may want to eat it. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the stem of our apple. That is the top woody part that you probably know. Now, what does the stem do? Why does the apple have a stem? If you thought because it attaches it to the tree, you guessed right. So we are very carefully with our butter knife going to scoop out the stem and separate it from the apple. And just like we discussed, the woody stem holds it up to the tree when it's growing. Let's take a closer look at the stem. You can see where it's connecting to the tissue of the apple. And we can go ahead and put it on our paper plate. So now we are going to be looking at the calyx, or the bottom of the apple. If you take a close look, the calyx kind of looks like it has little leaves. And this is left behind from when this apple was a flower. If you didn't know, all fruit, including strawberries, apples, oranges, they all grow from flowers. The trees make the flowers, and then the flowers die, and what grows in its place is a piece of fruit. So these are the old flower petals from the apple. So we are very carefully going to take out the calyx using our butter knife and put it on our paper plate. So now we've looked at the external anatomy. We've looked at the outside of the apple. We've looked at the skin, the stem, and the calyx. And just as a reminder, the skin helps retain the moisture of the apple. The calyx is where the apple grew from the flower. And the stem is what connects the apple to the tree that it grows off of. Let's go ahead and start cutting this apple open, and we will look at the internal anatomy, or the inside body parts of the apple. There are 2 ways we can cut our apple, which is why I've asked for 2 different apples. We can cut it down the length of the apple like you would if you were to share it with someone. But we will also cut it along the equator, if you will, horizontally. And you should be able to do this pretty easily with a butter knife, but please be very, very careful. So we're going to go ahead and start with cutting this apple along the equator or horizontally. Please be very careful using your butter knife. And let's open and see what we have. You'll notice that there is a star pattern on the inside, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now let's go ahead and cut this apple down the middle. This may be a little tougher to do, but you can do it. I believe in you. And now we can see into the apple in both planes of view, horizontal and vertical. Now they look a little different. Can you think or identify any differences between these two apples? We have a bit of a different perspective now. We can see the seeds and the core very differently. In the apple on the left, we can distinctly see the core and how it's separated from the rest of the flesh of the apple. And in the apple on the right with the star shape, it's really hard to see where the core starts and the rest of the apple begins. You can also see all of the seed pockets in the apple as well. And this star formation is it comes from when the apple was a flower. This flower most likely had 5 petals, which is why it has 5 seed pockets. So we're going to go ahead and take out a piece of flesh from this apple, or the mesocarp. It's a great science word for flesh. And carefully scoop it out with your butter knife. Awesome. We're going to put this on our internal anatomy plate that I've already labeled, and we're going to put it under mesocarp. Remember, mesocarp means apple flesh or fruit flesh. Next, we're going to go ahead and scoop out the core so we can get a closer look at the seeds. So you should be able to distinctly see where your core starts. You should also feel where it starts too. It feels a little woody or scratchy. Very carefully with your butter knife, go ahead and scoop it out. You can use your fingers. If you have tweezers or a spoon, that would also be really helpful too. And let's take a closer look at this. If you have a magnifying glass, this is the time to use it. Can you tell the difference, or can you see any differences between the core and the apple flesh? We're going to go ahead and put that on our internal anatomy plate, which means we have the seeds left. So in this perspective, I have to cut into my apple a little bit more, but if you have tweezers, you can go ahead and use those too. We're going to remove all of the seeds and see how many they have. This is a great moment to take a guess to see how many seeds you think will be in your apple before you take them out. So here I am taking out the seeds one by one. What are seeds used for? Why do apples have seeds? If you answered to make more apple trees, that is the right answer. So apples are basically just a vessel to spread all of these seeds. Apple trees want animals like us and squirrels or bunnies or whoever else eat apples to eat the apples, so hopefully we can spread their seeds farther and wider apart so more apple trees can grow. This is one way the apple trees can reproduce. So I had to cut open my apple a little bit. You don't have to, that's fine too. I have 4 seeds in this section of my apple. So I probably have at least 8 or maybe even 10 seeds in total. I'm going to go ahead and put those on my plate and take a look at everything with a magnifying glass. Thank you so much for joining me today in dissecting our apple. I hope you learned a little bit more about what an apple is and all of its different body parts. Now's the fun part. You can go ahead and eat your apple. All right, scientists, I'll see you next time.